They skipped my daughter's surgery. 3 days later, Dad begged for $4,000. I sent 25 cents. Then the bank called me. I still remember the way the nurse looked at me when she walked into the empty waiting room that morning. Pity mixed with confusion. The kind of look you give someone when something's obviously wrong, but you don't know if you're allowed to ask. My daughter Emma was having surgery. Nothing life-threatening, thank God, but serious enough that she'd be recovering for weeks. She's 6, bright as the sun, and brave as anything. She'd fallen and torn a ligament in her arm that required a delicate reconstruction, the type of surgery that terrifies a parent, even if the doctor says it's routine. We'd been preparing for weeks, explaining things to her, gently arranging her favorite snacks, making sure her stuffed giraffe Marvin came along for emotional backup. I thought at least one person from my family would show just one. I'm Jordan, by the way, 33, single dad since I was 27. Emma's mom walked out when she was just a baby. No dramatic cheating scandal or big courtroom fight, just a slow disappearance. One day, she said she wasn't meant to be a mother, packed up, and never looked back. I was terrified and completely unprepared. But from the moment I held that little bundle in my arms, crying like the world had ended, I knew I'd figure it out. And I did. My life isn't glamorous. I work IT support for a law firm and do a little freelance troubleshooting on the side, but it's stable. Emma and I have our routines, our inside jokes, our movie nights, and pancake Sundays. It's not flashy, but it's ours. And I thought my family, my parents, and my younger brother Caleb understood that they respected what I'd built with what little I had. I was wrong. It started off small, as these things do. Subtle stuff, like how my mom would constantly tell me that Emma needs a woman's influence, or that she feels sorry for her. Growing up in a broken home, she never said it crew, just in that tight-lipped, polite way that moms can twist the knife without raising their voice. My dad was more detached. He'd say things like, "You're doing your best," in a tone that made it sound like I was some overambitious child, not an actual parent doing all the work. Caleb didn't really engage with Emma at all. He'd show up for holidays, toss her a present with the tag still on, and then spend the rest of the time talking about his latest business idea. He's 29, self-proclaimed entrepreneur, and still living in the guest house behind my parents' home. Last year, it was a crypto startup. Before that, it was drop-shipping watches. And this year, apparently, it was luxury dog accessories. Every scheme somehow involved asking for money, and he always got it. I, on the other hand, learned early that if I needed help, I'd better have a spreadsheet, a PowerPoint, and a full list of repayment terms. I didn't borrow often, but when Emma had to get a dental procedure 2 years ago and I came up short after an emergency plumbing disaster, I asked my parents for $800 to bridge the gap. My dad made me sign a formal loan agreement, 5% interest payable in 6 months. I paid it off in 4 and they still bring it up. But I never pushed back. I thought maybe they just didn't get it. Maybe it was generational. Or maybe, if I was being really honest with myself, I just wanted to keep the peace. Emma adored her grandparents, even if their affection came with occasional passive aggression. And I didn't want her growing up feeling like she had no extended family. I told myself that as long as they weren't cruel, I could bite my tongue. Then came the surgery. We'd known the date for weeks. I texted the family group chat. I had reminded them 3 times. Emma's surgery is on the 11th. She's a little nervous, but being super brave. If you're able to stop by the hospital or send her a card, I know it would mean the world to her. Not a single response, not even a thumbs up. I tried to give them the benefit of a doubt. Maybe they were busy. Maybe they'd surprise her afterward with balloons or something cheesy, like they used to when we were kids. I even told Emma the night before, "You might see Grandma and Grandpa tomorrow, maybe even Uncle Caleb." She smiled so wide her missing front teeth made her look like a jack-o'-lantern. "I hope Grandpa brings jelly beans. She said he always eats them all, but I think that's funny." But no one came. The surgery went fine. The doctor said she did great. I sat there in that cold plastic chair for 6 hours, alternating between watching reruns on my phone and staring out the window pretending I wasn't angry. Emma woke up groggy, clutching Marvin and asking for apple juice. When we got home, I kept expecting something to show up. A call, a text, even a card. Nothing. 3 days later, I got the text from my dad. It buzzed, and while I was cooking dinner, Emma was in the living room drawing a picture of a lion holding an ice cream cone. I flipped the phone over without thinking, but the preview caught my eye. "Can you send $4,000 for your brother's wedding suit?" I stared at it for a full minute, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Caleb wasn't even engaged last I heard. Now he needed a $4,000 suit? I opened the message and read it twice, just to be sure. "Hey Jordan, I hope Emma is feeling better. Caleb's wedding is coming up fast, and he wants a designer suit. We told him we'd help, but it's been tight this month. Can you cover the $4,000 and we'll settle up later?" No apology for missing the surgery. No explanation, just this. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even get mad. Not yet. Instead, I put my phone down, finished making dinner, and sat with Emma while she told me about the lion's magical powers. I listened. I nodded. I smiled. Then, once she was asleep, I went into my banking apps. For years, I'd let my parents have some access. Join emergency accounts we'd set up when Emma was born, just in case. I'd even authorize them as backups on some things. I'd forgotten how much control I'd quietly handed over, just for the illusion of family support. I revoked everything. Then, for good measure, I opened my Venmo and sent my dad exactly 25 cents with the note, "Buy him a tie." That should have been the end of it, but the next morning my phone rang at 7:03 a.m. It was my mom, then my dad, then Caleb. Voicemails, texts, missed calls, and one message from my dad that made my stomach turn. "If you want to go nuclear, fine, but don't say we didn't try. You've made your choice. Just remember who helped raise you." I hadn't even started yet, but I knew right then that I was going to. Not out of spite, out of principle. Because if they thought they could pretend Emma didn't matter, if they thought they could keep using me while ignoring my daughter, they were about to learn what happens when a quiet single dad finally snaps. The voicemail started innocent enough. "Hey, sweetie, just wanted to check in." My mom's voice said, all breathy concern. "Your father said something about a Venmo joke. Caleb's feeling a little hurt. Call us back." Okay. It would have been funny if it weren't so calculated. Like they wanted me to feel like the crazy one. Like I had overreacted. By noon that same day, the tone had shifted. My dad left a message that was short and clipped. "Don't know what kind of games you're playing, Jordan, but this isn't how family behaves." That one stayed with me, not because of the words, but because of how familiar they sounded. It was the same tone he used when I was a teenager and decided to apply to an out-of-state college, the one they didn't approve of. The one I ended up not attending because my financial aid got mysteriously messed up and no one ever explained how. Emma was watching Lilo and Stitch on the couch when Caleb finally called. I let it go to voicemail again. He didn't disappoint. "Bro, a tie. You think you're clever? I've got fittings scheduled this week. I already told them we were doing Tom Ford. You seriously can't spot me after everything Mom and Dad have done for you, after everything they've done." I sat at the kitchen table, phone still in hand, wondering if I was losing it. Did I dream up the last 6 years of being a single dad, while everyone else in my family played house and congratulated themselves for moral support? Did I hallucinate that time I asked for help with Emma's daycare deposit and got a 6-paragraph lecture on taking responsibility? I didn't respond. Not out of anger yet, but because I needed time to think. This wasn't just about the $4,000. It was about the way they were rewriting history in real time, spinning my silence into guilt and their entitlement into duty. That night, I poured a glass of wine and dug out the old family group chat. I scrolled back months, then years. Birthday parties missed, last-minute cancellations dry, one-word replies to photos of Emma's school plays or Christmas drawings. Then I found it. The message I sent last year when Emma had her first violin recital. I bought her the instrument secondhand and sat through weeks of off-key screeches while she practiced. She was so proud when she got on that stage, fingers shaking, playing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. I invited everyone, not a single one of them showed. But Caleb had posted on Instagram that same night some rooftop cocktail party with a girl whose name I never learned. Blessed, the caption said. I guess it never occurred to them I'd remember these things, but I did. All of it. Still, I said nothing until the wedding invitations went out. That's when everything began to twist. The invitation was cream-colored, thick paper with gold-embossed letters and a little wax seal. Fancy, ridiculous. My name was printed alone. Jordan Williams plus guest. No mention of Emma, no checkbox for children, just me. That was my tipping point. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Maybe they were trying to save on headcount. But when I called my cousin Rachel, who's notoriously blunt and has 3 kids of her own, she told me the truth. Oh yeah, your mom told us it's adults only. Said she doesn't want the ceremony disrupted. Disrupted? Like Emma was a barking dog or someone's phone going off. She didn't mean it that way, Rachel added quickly, sensing the silence on my end. I'm sure she was just trying to keep things elegant. You know how your mom gets. Yeah, I knew. I didn't tell Emma. I couldn't. She'd been so excited when I showed her the save the date months ago. Do I get to wear a flower dress? She'd asked, eyes wide. Can I dance with Uncle Caleb? The fact that he barely acknowledged her hadn't fazed her one bit. Instead, I RSVP'd and said nothing to anyone. 2 weeks passed in silence. Then the manipulation began in earnest. My mom called during dinner. I didn't answer. She left a message. I know you're probably still upset, but Caleb really wants you there, Jordan. We all do. He was even asking if you'd make a speech. I told him you'd be honored. Let's not let little misunderstandings get in the way of such a special day. Little misunderstandings. I'd stayed quiet too long. That night, I texted my mom and dad both in the group thread. I was calm, polite, but I told them the truth. I won't be attending the wedding. I find it incredibly hurtful that Emma wasn't included or even acknowledged in the invitation. She's family. If that's not how you see it, then I have nothing else to contribute. I watched the 3 little dots pop up, then disappear. Nothing came through until the next morning. A single sentence from my dad. Stop making everything about your kid. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed. Everything about my kid. She wasn't some background character, she was my life. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment since the day she was born had been for her. And now I was being told by my own father that she was an inconvenience. But I wasn't shocked because it explained so much. It explained why, when Emma was born, they didn't come to the hospital for 2 days. Why, when I asked my mom to babysit once so I could go to a job interview, she said, I didn't raise my kids just to raise yours too. It explained why Caleb, who had never held a job longer than 6 months, was still treated like some golden son while I was the difficult one just for asking for support. Why every time I pushed back, I was labeled dramatic or oversensitive. Why they expected me to be there for them, but never the other way around. This wasn't about a suit. It wasn't even about the wedding. It was about how they saw me. More than that, how they saw Emma. An afterthought. I started noticing more after that. Subtle jabs, passive comments through other relatives. My aunt left a message one evening that was clearly meant to patch things up, but only made things worse. Honey, your parents are really hurt. They just wanted one day that wasn't about the kids. It doesn't mean they don't love Emma. Can't you just let this go? That phrase, one day that isn't about the kids, kept echoing in my head, as if most days are about the kids for them. As if they're the ones packing school lunches, or sitting through dentist appointments, or holding trembling little hands before surgery. Emma was my everyday, so I didn't let it go. A week before the wedding, Caleb sent me a message that was so absurd I had to reread it twice. Look, I know things have been tense, but we're family. We need to come together. You're the best, man. Remember, don't make this about politics or grudges. Just show up and give the speech. Dad said he already wrote some notes for you. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the file folder on my desktop labeled Estate. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in a long time. Bank statements, authorization forms, a copy of the account that my grandfather had left to me when he passed. I'd been managing it responsibly for years. The investments were modest but smart. And until recently, my parents had full co-signing privileges in case of emergencies. Not anymore. I stared at that balance, thought about the countless nights I'd skip dinners to make sure Emma had what she needed. Thought about the time I gave Caleb $500 for years ago, so he wouldn't get evicted. Money I never saw again. Thought about how my parents still hadn't once said, "How is Emma feeling after her surgery?" And then I made a decision. I wasn't just going to sit this wedding out. I was going to make sure they felt it. But not through yelling, not through some angry family email. No, this was going to be strategic, thoughtful, and final. They wanted a clean, pretty wedding. They were going to get a storm, and I hadn't even started yet. I wish I could say I was surprised when the final straw came. I wasn't, not really. Somewhere deep down, I think I always knew that my family was more invested in the appearance of love than love itself. But knowing something and seeing it, feeling it dig into your chest like a rusted nail, that's a different kind of hurt. The week before Caleb's wedding, I was trying to move on. Really, I was. I'd stopped answering their calls, cleared the group thread notifications, and poured myself into Emma's routine like nothing had happened. She had just gotten her cast off, and we were making a big deal of it, celebrating with extra ice cream, a new art set, and letting her pick the movie every night for a week. She chose Bolt 3 nights in a row, even though she cried every time the dog got lost. She said she liked the part where he found his way back. Anyway, I didn't miss the symbolism. Friday night rolled around, and Emma was sleeping over at her friend Isla's house, her first sleepover since the surgery. I was halfway through a late dinner and just settling into a rare moment of quiet when my phone buzzed. A message from my cousin Rachel. "Hey, I'm so sorry. I thought you knew." No context, no follow-up, just that. I called her immediately. "Jordan." She answered, voice low, like she was hiding in a pantry. "I didn't want to be involved in this, but you need to know what they did." My stomach turned. "What happened?" She hesitated. "Your mom. She told everyone you refused to bring Emma to the wedding, that you made a big scene about not wanting her exposed to unmarried people living together. She said you called the wedding immoral." I almost dropped the phone. What I could barely get the word out. "That's a lie. That's not even close to anything I said." "I know," she said quickly. "I know, but she said it in front of Aunt Marcia and Uncle Greg and like half the family. Caleb was there too. No one questioned it." I stood there in my dark kitchen, heart pounding in my ears, waiting for it to make sense. It didn't. "She said you sent that 25 cents to mock them," Rachel added, "and that you locked them out of the accounts to punish Caleb for getting married before you." I laughed not because it was funny, but because the audacity was so staggering it short-circuited my ability to respond. "Jordan, they've rewritten the whole thing. You're the villain now. People are saying Emma's become your whole personality, that you're using her as a crutch." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. Rachel sighed. "I just didn't want you to show up to the reception and get blindsided. I thought you knew." "I'm not going," I said automatically. "I know," she said, "but you should be the one to decide that, not them." I hung up, sat back down at the table, and stared at my half-eaten dinner. Suddenly, I wasn't hungry. I pulled up the family group chat and reread everything. My parents hadn't said a word about Emma's surgery. They hadn't apologized for skipping it. And now they were lying about me to the whole family to save face. They weren't just ignoring my daughter. They were erasing her. That was the moment something broke. Not in a dramatic, yelling, throwing plates kind of way. Quiet, like a door locking. This was never going to get better. I could twist myself into knots, trying to please them, trying to show up, trying to be reasonable, but they were never going to see me. Not as I was, not as a father, not as a person. And they were never going to see Emma as anything more than an extension of my choices. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I planned. Because if they wanted to pretend I was the villain, fine. I'd give them one. 2 days before the wedding, I got a call from my dad that I didn't expect to answer, but I did. Not out of forgiveness, out of curiosity. "Jordan," he said, curt and distant, like he was addressing a customer and not his own son. "We need to talk." "Go ahead." There was a pause then. "Your behavior has been deeply disappointing. I don't know what this vendetta is about, but your mother is upset. Your brother is stressed. And frankly, it's time for you to grow up." "Grow up," I repeated. "You've made everything about your daughter again. This wedding isn't about you or your child. It's about Caleb." There it was again. Your child. Not Emma. Not his granddaughter. Just a label, a burden, a mistake. They had long ago decided I had made, and now they were determined to punish me for it forever. You spread lies about me to the family, I said quietly. You told them I refused to bring her because of some moral objection, that I locked you out of my accounts to be petty. Do you even hear yourselves? My dad's voice didn't even flicker. We were trying to protect you. I laughed again, that strange, hollow laugh. Protect me from what? From being a good father? From having boundaries? We were protecting the family's reputation, he said flatly. If people heard you refuse to attend your own brother's wedding over a child's feelings, it would sound, a child's feelings, I snapped. Do you hear yourself? She's not a prop, Dad. She's not a political inconvenience. She's a human being. There was silence on the line. Then he said, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're hysterical, emotional, always have been. I hung up. I didn't trust myself not to scream. That night, Emma came home from her sleepover, bubbly and full of stories about baking cookies and staying up past bedtime. She had no idea what was brewing behind the scenes, and I wasn't going to let it touch her. Not yet. But I did tuck her in that night with an extra long hug. And after she was asleep, I opened my laptop and got to work. First, I wrote an email to the family, every cousin, aunt, and relative who had gotten that twisted version of events. It was calm, detailed, full of screenshots and receipts. I explained exactly what had happened. I included a timeline. I didn't editorialize. I let the facts speak for themselves. Then I sent a second email, this one to my lawyer. You see, what my parents had conveniently forgotten, and what Caleb never knew, was that the trust Grandpa left me had certain protections and clauses. Clauses that my father had waved away back when I was 19 and didn't understand what they meant. Clauses about misuse. Clauses about breach of cosigner privileges. Clauses that gave me full legal right to audit every single withdrawal that had ever been made by my parents on my behalf. The account had been dormant for years aside from some conservative investments, but not anymore. I requested a full forensic audit, and then I found something I wasn't supposed to find. A wire transfer. 2 years ago, $16,000 labeled Caleb Seed Funding Private Investment. I sat back in my chair, heart hammering. My parents had taken money from Emma's future, from the account I had guarded for years without telling me, and given it to Caleb to fund a dog hat company that went bankrupt 6 months later. I called the bank. They confirmed it. The authorization had been signed with my dad's cosigner status pre-revocation. It wasn't fraud, but it was betrayal. The next day, I filed to revoke all secondary access retroactively. I wasn't sure it would hold up, but I had to try. That night, my mom showed up at my doorstep unannounced. I didn't open the door. She knocked for 5 minutes straight. Then she slid a letter under the door, handwritten. I read it once, then again. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea, a demand. She said the family was crumbling because of me, that Emma was making me weak, that if I didn't stop this crusade, I would be downed, disinvited, and dishonored. Her exact word, dishonored, like we were in a royal court. The next morning, I woke up to find Emma sitting at the kitchen table staring at my phone. Daddy, she said softly, why did Grandma post a picture of Caleb on Facebook that says, the only son we're proud of? I froze. She shouldn't have seen that, but she did. And something changed in her eyes. Something quiet. Something permanent. And that was when I knew I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for her. And war was coming. The Monday after the wedding felt, still not in a peaceful way, but like the quiet that follows an explosion, where the air feels heavy and everything sounds just a little too distant. Emma was back at school and I was working from home, but I couldn't focus. My inbox was full, my coffee had gone cold, and I'd read the same line of an IT troubleshooting manual 7 times before realizing I wasn't even blinking. I kept thinking about that photo, the one Emma saw on Facebook. It was just a simple image. Caleb, in his wedding suit, presumably the Tom Ford I, refused to pay for, posing with our parents under a canopy of white roses. My mother wore a blue dress. My father had his usual deadpan smirk. And Caleb was grinning like he just won the lottery. The caption, written by my mother in that cloying tone she used for online posts, read, "Proud doesn't even begin to cover it. Our son, our light, our legacy." And then the hashtags, hashtag best son, hashtag family first, hashtag only son. We're proud of that last one. That's the one Emma saw. I don't even remember walking to her that morning. I just remember finding her at the kitchen table, her tablet in front of her, her fingers resting on the edge like she wasn't sure if she should keep touching it. Her expression didn't match the 7-year-old I knew. No tears, no pout, just stillness. Why would Grandma say that she asked, quietly, eyes not moving from the screen? I crouched down beside her. I don't know, honey, I said, trying not to let my voice crack. Sometimes people say things online that they don't mean, or maybe they forget who's reading. But I thought they liked me. You're amazing. Anyone who doesn't see that doesn't deserve to be in your life. She nodded like she understood, but her eyes, God, her eyes, they stayed a little too blank for my comfort. I kissed her forehead and told her to get ready for school. She obeyed robotically. I watched her zip up her backpack without a word. It was the first time I saw her armor go up, and I hated them for it. After dropping her off, I sat in the car for 15 minutes without starting the engine, just breathing, watching the sidewalk, trying to remember how we got here. I thought back to when Emma was born, back when my parents first visited the hospital. 2 days late, after I had already spent 48 hours alone, feeding her formula and watching over her tiny body in a plastic crib. My mom had brought a balloon and a blanket, and my dad had stood at the doorway like he was checking into a motel. I remember holding Emma up to them, expecting warmth. Instead, my mother said, "She looks tired already. You're going to have to learn to sleep when she sleeps." No congratulations. No, you did it. Just advice I hadn't asked for. In a deep sigh as she looked around the room and said, "I guess this'll do for now." Back then, I didn't know better. I told myself they were just overwhelmed that they'd warm up, that time would heal it. It never did. They treated Emma like a technicality, something they tolerated because she came with me, like baggage. And now, 7 years later, they were proud to shout from the rooftops that she didn't count. That I didn't count. I hit rock bottom that week, not just emotionally, financially too. The audit came back on Thursday. I had been holding out some hope. Maybe that wire transfer was a fluke. Maybe they hadn't touched anything else. Nope. Over $27,000 had been withdrawn from my grandfather's trust account in small increments over the course of 5 years, all under the justification of family emergencies. All signed by my father back when he still had authorization. There were no receipts, no itemizations. One $5,000 transfer was labeled simply, "Caleb's move-in support." Another was tagged as "wedding planning consultation," dated nearly 8 months before I even knew Caleb was engaged. I stared at the printout, the spreadsheet clean and damning in black and white. And I realized that everything I had clung to, my trust in them, my belief that they simply didn't understand what they were doing, had been naive. They knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't make a mistake. They made a choice. And I had been the idiot feeding them access and information all these years, like a loyal dog who kept coming back, tail wagging even after being kicked. I went through stages of grief that night: anger, shock, shame, rage, again, but mostly exhaustion. I sat on the floor of my living room, the audit papers spread around me like confetti, and cried for the first time in years. Not sobbing, not loud. Just slow, painful tears that felt like they were coming from somewhere behind my ribs. Because I wasn't just grieving the money, I was grieving the illusion. I had no family anymore, not in the way I thought. I spent the weekend avoiding calls. Rachel texted me once saying the wedding had been nice, but weird without you. I didn't respond. I didn't check Facebook either. I didn't want to see the smiling pictures, the happy captions, the digital version of the family I used to believe I belonged to. Emma seemed to sense the change. She clung to me more that weekend, sat beside me while I worked, slept in my bed without asking, drew pictures of just the two of us, her and me standing under a rainbow, Marvin the stuffed giraffe between us. I taped one to the fridge like it was a shield. That Sunday, something inside me finally shifted. Not toward revenge, not yet, but towards something. A line being drawn. A realization that I couldn't just exist in limbo anymore, pretending we were taking space or letting things cool off. There was nothing left to cool. The bridge wasn't damaged. It was gone. So I started quietly preparing. I changed the password on every digital banking platform I had. I removed my name from the shared storage unit I had been helping Caleb pay for. He used it to store failed business inventory, mostly branded dog bow ties and in used candle molds. I contacted my grandfather's estate lawyer not just to report the misuse of funds, but to begin the process of transferring the account entirely under Emma's name, with a trust clause she could access when she turned 18. I updated my will, I updated hers, and then, slowly, I began documenting everything. The messages, the voicemails, the withdrawals, the false claims on social media. Because if they ever tried to challenge me again, legally, financially, socially, I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. They taught me that. They trained me, really. And now they were going to see what it looked like when the son they underestimated got serious. But before any grand revenge could unfold, I had to sit with the weight of it all. I had to face the loneliness because, make no mistake, it was lonely when your parents turn on you. When your sibling becomes a stranger, when the people who are supposed to love you, who held you as a baby, who watched you grow, look at your child and see a mistake instead of a miracle. That kind of loneliness cuts deep. I didn't tell Emma the full story. Not yet. She was too young. But I did start saying no when she asked about going to Grandma's. And when she asked why, I just said, "Because you deserve better, sweetheart." And sometimes that means walking away. She nodded like she understood, and I think in her own quiet 7-year-old way, she did. And that's when I started getting stronger. That's when the storm started to turn. Not because I wanted revenge, but because they'd left me no choice. They called it dishonor. I was about to show them what honor actually looked like. For the first time in years, my phone was silent. No buzz from my mom sending Emma a passive-aggressive Bible quote. No late-night call from Caleb asking for a quick transfer that he always forgot to pay back. No family group chat filled with recipes and baby shower photos I wasn't invited to. Just silence. It was eerie at first, lonely even. But then something happened. I started to breathe, not shallowly, not like I was constantly bracing for impact. I mean really breathe. Long, full exhales that reached all the way down into my chest, the kind I hadn't realized I'd been holding in for years. Walking away from my family hurt. I won't pretend it didn't. But in that space where their noise used to be, I started to hear something else myself. And I was furious, but focused. It was Monday morning when I got the call from the bank's legal compliance officer. She confirmed the audit findings and scheduled a follow-up meeting to discuss next steps. Technically, she said, you're within your rights to pursue a formal restitution claim, especially given the violation of the trust's intended purpose. I didn't say yes, not yet, because part of me, some fragile part still clinging to the old Jordan, wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt one last time. Maybe they'd return the money quietly, maybe they'd apologize, maybe they'd finally recognize how far they'd crossed the line. They didn't. In fact, that same day, my father posted a photo of Caleb on LinkedIn posing in his custom suit with the caption, "Proud to watch my son step into the next chapter, marriage, business, legacy. A man who honors family, works hard, and deserves everything coming to him. Hashtag family first. Hashtag leadership. Hashtag generational success." Legacy. That word hit differently now because for the first time, I realized I was someone's legacy too. Emma's. And she deserved better than this narrative my family kept trying to write over us. So I did something I hadn't done in a long, long time. I invested in myself. Literally, I took a small portion of my freelance earnings and opened a separate investment account in Emma's name, completely disconnected from the trust my grandfather left. It wasn't much to start, just a few thousand, but it was hers, truly hers. No co-signers, no access, no back doors, just a seed. And then I did more. I'd always done freelance IT work on the side, mostly fixing home networks and setting up email clients for people too busy or too old to care about tech. But I'd never marketed it, never really leaned in. That changed fast. I bought a domain, built a sleek one-page site, paid a graphic designer to create a logo, a stylized giraffe holding a laptop in honor of Marvin Emma's stuffed animal and loyal mascot. The tagline read, "Smart support for real life." And then, quietly, without making a big deal of it, I launched. At first, nothing happened. A few clicks. One request to fix a printer jam from a nice woman named Cheryl. But then, Rachel, my cousin, the only one who had warned me about the lies, shared the link on her Facebook, and her husband shared it. And then, a lawyer he worked with needed help migrating a firm's servers to the cloud. That project alone paid my rent for 2 months. Momentum, that's what it felt like. And once it started, it didn't stop. I began blocking off one night a week to handle side clients after Emma went to bed. It was exhausting at times, but it was mine. Every invoice, every thank you email, every dollar. Mine. 3 months later, I double my freelance income. 5 months later, I was making more than my full-time job. I didn't quit right away. I wanted stability, benefits, but I talked to HR, restructured my hours, and negotiated a remote hybrid position that gave me 2 days a week, entirely for my own clients. And on those days, I thrived. I wasn't just working, I was building. At home, Emma started to notice the changes too. She'd walk in after school and say, "Did you have a good client today?" And I'd show her the silly giraffe logo on my screen. She started drawing variations. Giraffe in a cape, giraffe drinking coffee, giraffe sitting on a stack of books. We made one of them into a sticker and put it on her backpack. She called it our secret team. I smiled so much it hurt. It wasn't just the business either. Things at school improved. Emma joined the music club. I volunteered to help set up the parent-teacher portal, and the principal asked if I'd consider helping out part-time with tech support. It wasn't a big job, but it put me on their radar. People started seeing me again, not just as a guy with baggage or a struggling single dad, but as someone competent, reliable, capable. That summer, Emma and I took our first vacation. It wasn't fancy. We rented a cabin by the lake and brought board games, marshmallows, and bug spray. But it was ours, just the two of us, fishing off the dock and watching stars blink awake while crickets chirped in the tall grass. One night, as we were roasting marshmallows, Emma looked at me and asked, "Do you think Grandma still doesn't like me?" I froze. The question came out of nowhere. I thought carefully before I spoke. I think Grandma has a lot of stuff inside her that she hasn't dealt with, and sometimes people like that hurt others even when they don't mean to. Emma nodded slowly. I used to think it was my fault. It's not even a little. She stared into the fire. Okay, I don't think I want to visit her anymore. And just like that, she let it go, better than I ever could. When we got home from that trip, something felt different. Cleaner, quieter, like the chapter had ended. But of course, life has a way of circling back when you least expect it. One afternoon in September, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Mr. Callahan, my grandfather's old attorney. Subject: request for mediation. Inside was a short formal note. Mr. Williams, I have been contacted by your father, Robert Williams, regarding a dispute over the terms and management of your grandfather's family trust. He has requested a mediation session before formal legal steps are taken. Please advise on your availability. I stared at the screen for a long time. So that was their next move. Not an apology, not repayment a challenge. It was almost impressive. But what they didn't realize was I wasn't the same person anymore. They were expecting the old Jordan, the one who folded, the one who begged to be loved. They weren't ready for this version. The one who had nothing to lose and everything to protect. I clicked reply, typed 4 words. Let's schedule it soon. And for the first time in my entire life, I smiled while facing a fight, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about legacy, mine Emma, and I was ready to claim it. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in early October, 9 a.m. Sharp downtown neutral ground. Mr. Callahan's office hadn't changed in over a decade. Same dark mahogany paneling, same oversized green banker's lamp on the corner of his desk, same wall clock that ticked just a little too loud. I remembered being 17 the first time I sat in that office. My grandfather had brought me there, just the two of us. I was in a wrinkled hoodie, slouched in a leather chair, pretending not to care. He talked about the future, about responsibility, about protecting what mattered. At the time, I didn't get it. I thought he was talking about money. He wasn't. That memory stayed with me as I walked into the room. Mr. Callahan stood to greet me with a warm, worn-out smile. "Jordan, thank you for coming." "Of course," I said, shaking his hand. Then I turned to see my parents already seated on the other side of the long walnut table. My mother's lips pressed into a flat, polite smile. My father didn't even try. He leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. They hadn't seen me in nearly a year. No visit, no birthday card for Emma, not even a text. And yet, here they were, acting like I was the one who needed to explain himself. I took my seat, opened my folder, laid out the audit documents with quiet precision. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. "Let's begin." It started civil. They always do. My parents were deeply concerned about the handling of the trust. They regretted any past misunderstandings. They believed family resources should be shared. They threw around words like intent family equity and mutual respect. But the more they spoke, the more it became clear what this was really about. They wanted access again. The trust account, though, diminished by their previous withdrawals, was still valuable. The investments had performed well. The fund was projected to grow significantly in the next 5 years, especially if left untouched. My father leaned in, finally dropping the pretense. "Let's be honest," he said flatly. "That money wasn't meant for you to hoard. Your grandfather wanted to uplift the family. That includes your brother." I didn't flinch. My grandfather left me that money in my name, with very specific clauses which we helped manage when you were too young to understand. My mother chimed in. "You didn't even read the original trust letter." We made sure it was handled correctly. That's when it happened. The setup, the turning point. Mr. Callahan, who had been silent up until now, reached into his file drawer and pulled out a worn brown envelope. "Actually, he did read it," he said calmly. "Jordan requested the full original document and the handwritten letter 3 months ago. I sent him both." He slid a copy across the table. I watched my parents' faces change in real time. They didn't know. They had been banking on the assumption that I never saw the original letter, the one my grandfather wrote by hand, outlining his intentions for the trust. Not the legal jargon, but the real message, the heart of it. My mother's hand twitched. My father's jaw flexed. I spoke slowly. Clearly, I know exactly what Grandpa wanted. He left this trust to me not just for financial security, but because he believed I would be a good steward of his values. He wrote that in his own words. "To Jordan, who I trust will use this not only to build a future for himself, but to protect those who come after him." I let the silence hang. "Emma," I added quietly. He meant Emma. My father looked like he wanted to object. My mother started to say something, but Callahan raised a hand. "I've reviewed everything he said, and legally, the trust now falls entirely under Jordan's management. His revocation of cosigner rights is valid, and retroactive penalties for unauthorized withdrawals can be pursued should he wish to escalate." More silence. Then my mother, trying to salvage ground. "You're really going to hold this over our heads? We're your parents. We were just trying to support Caleb." I stared at her. "You didn't come to your granddaughter's surgery." My father scoffed. "She was getting her arm fixed, not heart surgery." "She was 6, scared, and she kept asking where her grandparents were." My voice didn't rise. I didn't need to yell. "You were too busy planning a wedding for a man you gave thousands of dollars to from a fund that wasn't yours." My mother's eyes filled with something. Guilt, maybe. Or maybe just embarrassment at being called out. But I wasn't finished. "This isn't about the money," I said. "It's about trust. You didn't just take from me. You took from her. And now you're here pretending you did it out of love." I looked at Callahan. "We're done here." He nodded. "Understood." My parents started to speak, but I stood and gathered my papers. Then I paused, turned to them. "I'm not going to sue," I said. "Not because you don't deserve it, but because I've already won." My father frowned. "Won what exactly?" I smiled. "Freedom." And then I left. That should have been the end of it, but fate had one more card to play. 2 weeks later, I got an email from a local small business grant foundation. I had applied on a whim. A friend of a client had forwarded me the link, and I submitted my application half asleep one night after Emma had finally gone down. I'd forgotten all about it. The email subject line said, "Congratulations, I had won a $15,000 small business grant to help expand my tech services into underfunded schools and community centers." It came with local press coverage, a photo shoot, a short feature in the city newsletter. Emma was there for the picture, holding Marvin and grinning beside me while I stood with a giant check, like I just won the lottery. The next day, the article went live. With it, my name, my business, my story, and suddenly, my inbox exploded. Clients, partnerships, requests from schools I didn't even know existed. One of them even came from our old district, the one where Caleb and I went to school, the one where my mother still volunteered. I accepted, and I made sure the press release mentioned my daughter by name. Jordan Williams, founder of Smart Support for Real Life, credits his daughter Emma as the inspiration behind his business. It wasn't revenge, not yet, but it was a warning shot. I was visible, now respected. No longer the quiet brother in the background, no longer the one who begged for scraps. I was a provider, a father, a leader. And the best part, I hadn't even started on the real revenge. That was still coming, and when it landed, it would change everything. They say revenge is best served cold. I disagree. It's best served quietly, with a smile, with precision, and with no need to explain yourself to the people who once made you beg for the bare minimum. By the time winter rolled in, everything was in motion. The business was thriving. What started as a few IT calls and side gigs had evolved into something real, something sustainable. Smart Support for Real Life had landed its 5th school district contract. By early November, Emma and I started calling them missions. Each new school was a fortress we were rebuilding one dusty server room at a time. She'd draw little maps with treasure chests and red excess and tape them to my office wall. Every mission brought new visibility. Every feature story, client testimonial, and parent referral built momentum. I was no longer someone's afterthought. I was someone's solution. But as my world expanded, my parents' grip tightened, at least in the ways they thought they still had leverage. They stopped reaching out directly after the mediation, but I catch glimpses of their pettiness in the family's outer orbit. Subtle things. A cousin would cancel a coffee meetup last minute with a vague, "Your mom's not happy about us seeing you." A holiday invitation would be accidentally lost in the mail. Someone unfriended me online for reasons they wouldn't explain. It was a quiet exile. But they forgot one thing. They built their social currency on appearances, and I now had access to the one thing they valued more than their pride perception. And so I began the setup. Not loudly, not vindicatively, just surgically. Step 1. The Scholarship Fund. The first real strike came under the guise of generosity. I took a portion of the business grant I'd received, along with some savings I'd been building, and started a micro-scholarship program in my grandfather's name. The William Harris Tech Pathways Fund, a modest award, $1,000 apiece for underprivileged high school students pursuing IT or computer science careers. It was a tribute to the man who had actually believed in me. The one person in my family who had seen Emma as a continuation of his legacy, not a mistake. But the best part, I launched the fund with a press conference at the community center my parents used to serve on the board of. Used to. They'd quietly stepped back in recent years, but they still bragged about their service whenever convenient. I made sure the flyer for the event went out to all former board members. I made sure the photo of me and Emma, her holding up a certificate, me holding the mic, was published in the local paper. I made sure the tagline printed under the photo read, "Harris legacy continues through grandson and great-granddaughter." Not a single mention of my parents. I didn't have to say a word. The silence did all the work for me. Step 2. Caleb's cracks. It took longer than I expected, but eventually the cracks in Caleb's image began to show. Rachel, bless her soul, kept me in the loop. She didn't even have to dig. It just started unraveling on its own. Apparently, Caleb's luxury pet brand was failing again. The influencers he paid to promote his designer chew toys had stopped posting. One of his vendors had accused him of late payments. His new wife, Yes, they'd married in a high-production blur of drone footage and rented chandeliers, had posted cryptic Instagram stories about people who pretend to be CEOs but can't balance a checkbook. The most telling part, my parents had gone radio silent. They didn't brag about him anymore, didn't repost his business updates. The hashtag Proud Parent hashtags disappeared. And one night, Rachel sent me a screenshot from a community Facebook group. ISO Affordable IT Help for My Small Business. My usual guy isn't available. Any recommendations? Posted by Caleb Williams. I stared at it for a full minute. Then I sent her a message. Don't tag me, let him sit in it. And I moved on, because while he was posting vague desperation and watching his reputation slowly collapse, I had already laid the groundwork for the next phase. Step 3. The Gala. The community gala had always been my mother's crown jewel. Every year, she'd share the silent auction and talk about how much she gave back to the neighborhood. It wasn't charity, it was theater. Well, this year, the committee had been reshuffled. New blood, new energy. And guess who had been asked to co-sponsor the event after helping 3 local schools modernize their systems? That's right, me. Smart Support for Real Life became a premier sponsor with my name printed on the invitations and banners right beneath the school district seal. Emma even designed a version of the giraffe logo wearing a bow tie for the occasion. When the program brochure went to print, I saw the final list of donors. My parents weren't on it. Neither was Caleb. They'd been replaced. Erased, even. And I didn't do it maliciously. I simply showed up where they had stopped showing up. I earned what they had coasted on for years. The night of the gala, I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn to Emma's kindergarten graduation. Nothing flashy, just sharp, confident. Emma wore a sparkly dress. She picked out herself and introduced herself as Chief Creative Officer of the business. Everyone laughed, but they remembered her name. When they asked about my parents, I smiled and said, "We've taken different paths, but I'm thankful for the foundation my grandfather gave me. It was neutral, it was graceful, and it burned, because 3 people texted me the next day asking if my parents had been disinvited from the gala. I didn't answer. Let the silence say it for me." Step 4, the audit letter. This one was for me. I hired a private accountant to produce a full legal report of the unauthorized withdrawals from my grandfather's trust. Not just the total amounts, not just the timelines, but the long-term cost of what had been lost. What those funds could have become had they not been drained to prop up Caleb's failed endeavors. Then I printed it, found it, and mailed a copy to my parents' address. No note, no threat, just the facts. Numbers don't beg, they expose. Step 5. Emma's moment. This was the moment I knew I'd won. Not because my parents were humiliated, not because Caleb's business crumbled, but because Emma, my Emma, stood on stage at her school's winter showcase, violin in hand, and introduced her solo piece to a packed auditorium. She said clearly and proudly, "This is for my dad. He always shows up every time." And then she played. I cried the whole way through. After the performance, parents came up to shake my hand. Teachers asked if I consider helping with their other campuses. A school board member told me I was exactly the kind of partner they hoped to find. In the back of the auditorium, I saw a familiar figure slip in late. My mother, no makeup, eyes tired. She watched for maybe 5 minutes, then she slipped out again. Didn't say a word, didn't approach us, didn't clap. But I saw her, and I knew. She saw us too. She saw what she lost. She saw what she'd thrown away in pursuit of appearances and golden child delusions. And that was the real revenge. No screaming, no lawsuits. Just a life so full, so honest, so clearly thriving that there was nothing left for her to do but watch it from the outside. Because we weren't part of her story anymore. We were building our own. I didn't hear from my parents again until March. It came in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a voicemail, a letter. Handwritten in my mother's slanted, too-neat handwriting that always reminded me of old recipe cards and passive-aggressive Christmas cards from her friends. It arrived folded in thirds, inside a cream-colored envelope, unmarked except for my name and address. No return address. I stood in my kitchen for nearly 5 minutes before opening it, just staring at the envelope, my mind racing through possibilities. Apology, guilt, accusations. When I finally opened it, it was exactly what I expected, and yet, somehow, still worse. Jordan, I hope this letter finds you well. Your father and I have had time to reflect on everything that's happened over the past year. We've read the news articles, seen the photos, and heard about your work. While we don't agree with the way things were handled, we want to acknowledge that you've done well for yourself and Emma. We do, however, feel that this prolonged estrangement is unhealthy for everyone. It sets a dangerous example for Emma, teaching her to hold grudges and punish people rather than understand them. She deserves a full family, not just a father with a chip on his shoulder. Your brother has been struggling. His business folded, and he and Melanie have separated. He moved back into the guest house for now. He could use support from you, from his only sibling. Family means stepping up, not walking away. We're not asking for much, just dinner. A chance to talk, to clear the air. If you're willing to move forward, we are too. Think about it, Mom. No signature from my father, no love, no mention of the money they stole, the lies they spread, the public erasure of Emma's existence, just the performance. A last-ditch attempt to reassert control, to frame me as the problem, the grudge holder, the one preventing the family from healing. I read the letter twice. Then I fed it into the shredder. Not out of anger, out of clarity, because I finally saw it for what it was, a pattern. They hadn't changed. They never would. They'd been waiting for me to fail, waiting for me to come crawling back, waiting for the world to put me in my place so they could welcome me home. Like prodigal parents. But I hadn't failed. I had flourished, and they didn't know what to do with that. Emma came home from school later that afternoon, kicking off her shoes and tossing her backpack on the couch. She'd just made the honor roll for the second time in a row. I'd framed her certificate and hung it on the wall beside her artwork. "Can I have grilled cheese tonight?" she asked, flopping onto the carpet with Marvin tucked under her arm. "Grilled cheese it is." She paused. "Did Grandma write back?" I hesitated. She did, but it wasn't really about you, or us. She tilted her head. "Did she say she was sorry?" "No." Emma picked at a loose thread on Marvin's leg. "That's okay," she said. "I don't think I need her to anymore." And just like that, it was over. Not with a fight, not with a final confrontation, just a simple decision. We were done. We moved on. That spring, Smart Support for Real Life opened its first physical office, a small but sleek corner suite in a refurbished downtown building. The city awarded us a Community Tech Innovation Grant. Emma cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony while local kids lined up for free tech demos. I hired 2 part-time employees. One of them was a single dad like me. We set up a rotating childcare corner in the office, complete with puzzles, snacks, and a secondhand switch. Every photo we took, every article we were featured in, every newsletter we published listed our values at the top. Family first, people-powered, legacy-minded. We meant every word. I saw Rachel again at a local networking event. She pulled me into a hug and whispered, "They're still talking about you, like you've disappeared, like you're bitter." I smiled. "I haven't disappeared," I said. "I just stopped performing for people who didn't want to see me." Caleb emailed me 2 months later, a single line. "Any chance you'd consider a loan? Just need to get back on my feet." I didn't respond, not because I was cruel, but because he needed to learn what standing really meant, and me. I had too many people depending on me now. Too many missions, too much life to build, too much joy to protect. On Father's Day, Emma made me a card with crayon drawings of our house, our office, and a giraffe flying a rocket ship. Inside she'd written, "Thank you for always showing up. I love our team." I kept it in my wallet. That was the only legacy I needed. And the next time someone asked me what happened to my family, I just told them the truth. They taught me everything I needed to know by showing me exactly what not to become.